Sparkles from the Wheel, Walt Whitman. Where the city's ceaseless crowd moves on the livelong day, withdrawn, I join a group of children watching. I pause aside with them. By the curb, toward the edge of the flagging, a knife grinder works at his wheel, sharpening a great knife. Bending over, he carefully holds it to the stone by foot and knee with measured thread. He turns rapidly as he presses with light but firm hand. Fourth issue, then, in copious golden jets, sparkles from the wheel. The scene and all its belongings, how they seize and affect me. The sad, sharp-chinned old man with worn clothes and broad-shoulder band of leather. Myself, effusing and liquid, a phantom curiously floating, now here absorbed and arrested. The group, an unminded point, set in a vast surrounding. The attentive, quiet children, the loud, proud, restive bass of the streets, the low, hoarse purr of the whirling stone, the light-pressed blade, diffusing, dropping, sideways dotting, in the tiny showers of gold, sparkles from the wheel. So the first stanza describes a street scene, and we hear that the poet Whitman joins a group of children who are at attention, quietly watching the knife grinder at his work, and that is all. And then the second stanza, it's the same thing. We see the same participants in the same activity going on, but obviously there's a reason why stanza 2 stands separate and apart from stanza 1. There must be some difference. So on first look, it's pretty obvious that the first stanza is a straightforward description of the scene, okay? No more than that, just the details. Whereas the second, we are told that the details seize and affect me, the narrator. And then he gets into more concrete description of detail in regards to the man and the sounds of the streets and the background sounds and the actual scene itself being separate and apart from the rest of the activity going on in the world. Okay, so that's just a general overview. There are 2 points that I want to bring out. One is that, when you look at a detail, that's, an optical perception that we see. We see an object and we respond to that. But if we are to place a number of details around or together with one another, we can create something beyond a separate detail, that the individual parts create a whole, and that's called gestalt. All right, I covered that in the poem Come from the Field, Father. So these 2 poems are somewhat similar, because in each poem you have 2 paragraphs, 2 descriptive scenes, and one is pretty just straightforward detail, and the other one is affective. That means that we respond to it. All right, we emotionally respond to it, and when we see something and draw a conclusion from it, that's called inductive reasoning. Okay, so if I were to, there are 2 kinds of reasoning: inductive and deductive. Okay, so deductive is I give you a truism, some a fact of life, some reality, some statement, and then from that statement you look and you find examples that would prove that. Say, oh, here's an example of what he was talking about here. All right, That's deductive. Inductive is the other way around. We are given details, and from the details, we draw our own conclusion, and we come up with a truism or a statement of fact of life. Okay, so I prefer the second because it's more convincing. I found the details, and I convinced myself based on what I saw. I draw those conclusions. So basically, that's what happens in the second stanza. The first stanza is pretty much deductive. All right, he gives us an overview. He's giving the description, whereas the second one, we are drawing our conclusions about what we see. Okay, so that is really the purpose of this poem. Whitman wants us to draw a conclusion about what he has described, and we react the way he has presented the details and wants us to react to it. Okay, so that happened in Come From the Field, Father, too, where we respond to the tragedy that befell the family on the farm, when the boy was killed in action. All right, so let's take a look at this poem. I'll begin with a general statement. There's a difference between a poet's use of pure description, that's what I was talking about, perception to the eye, it's a detail, and his reflection on what he has described. And I'll call that perception as thought. How these descriptive details affect our thinking so that we react to it and we draw a conclusion from what we look at. Okay? So in Sparkles from the Wheel, Whitman demonstrates this difference between describing the world objectively, and that would be the first stanza, by simply employing pure description or transcription. Okay, he's transcribing on paper what he wants you to see. That's a detail. And describing it subjectively, this is the other, by providing us with details that will cause us to react to his purpose. Okay, and that's the second stanza. This poem is divided into two stanzas. Each stanza describes the same street scene in which a knife grinder is making sparks fly from the wheel as a group of children stand by in delightful, quiet attention. In the first stanza, Whitman, as narrator, simply tells us that he joined the group. I pause aside with them, that's all, and relates the scene in straightforward detail. Its description is purely transcriptive. All right, a knife grinder works at the wheel, sharpening a great knife. And that's what it's all about. Okay, and there were kids watching, and he is with them. The last line isn't inverted. It's a little difficult to read the last line. It's inverted, means it's backwards. The subject of the entire sentence is at the end, and all of the descriptive elements, what we would normally put at the end of the sentence, they precede it. They come in the beginning. All right. So he's describing the sparks as they issue forth from the knife's contact with the wheel, and this is the way he says it. Forth issued then in copious jets, sparkles from the wheel. Okay. Forth means the adverb. Issue is the main verb, and the jets is the subject. Sparkles is the subject. All right. So this is the way it would be in straightforward, simple sentence. Sparks from the wheel issue forth in copious jets. Okay, so that's how you have to read these. Some of these poems become difficult because of the syntax, all right, the arrangement of the words. All right, so in the second stanza, he once again describes the scene and all its belongings. That's what he says. But now he inserts himself within it. He calls himself effusing himself into it. He becomes a phantom part of the scene, and he provides commentary on its details, saying how they seize and affect me. Whitman tells the reader that he is seized by the appearance of not only the knife grinder's physical characteristics, but all the encompassing details too. The entire group of children, himself within it, that group, the man, the physical characteristics, sociological description of the man, his age, and its physical features, the chin, sharp chin, sad, all right, the sounds of the moving traffic. We hear loud, proud, restive bass of the street. All right, that's, the passengers, the, passers by, and if they are passing, they're on horse. If the traffic or drawn by horse, because this is during the American Civil War, that period, 1800s, 1850s, 60s. And then the sounds, the low hoarse purr of the whirling stone. We didn't hear that in the beginning. And the sight of the emanating sparks from the wheel, called showers of gold. So the significant difference between the first stanza and the second is that the second stanza, everything seems to take on a life of its own, sometimes even suggesting an animation in the inanimate, okay, like the sounds purr from the wheel, an animal sound. It is a second look at the same scene with all its details, but on the second look, our emotions and thought processing are affected by the description, okay? He begins with the knife grinder. The man is sad. He's wearing worn clothes. He displays the sign of his trade, a leather shoulder strap. Then Whitman seems to allow himself to be removed physically from the others, and he says, myself effusing in liquid, a phantom curiously floating, almost like above the scene, looking down on it, now here and absorbed and arrested. Okay, that's more than being seized. Seized, you're just held temporarily, but absorbed and arrested, it's more permanent, So he has effused himself into the experience, and now he sees himself from the perspective of a floating phantom, absorbed totally into the scene and arrested by it. In other words, the viewpoint has changed from Whitman being objective narrator, descriptive, transcriptional, just writing down what he sees, but now as a narrator to being one in and part of the scene, okay, with it. He is speaking as an outsider about himself. The knife grinder takes on human characteristics. Before, he was just a man sharpening the blade of a knife, okay? And the reader's response now is similar to that of Whitman's response. We are told that he's sad, he's old, he's sharp-chinned, and he's wearing old clothes, worn clothes of his trade. Okay, the key word is worn. I left it out. A broad-shouldered band that he will loop around the wheel and treadle. Whitman is drawn to the feeling permanently etched on the knife grinder's face, and that's sadness. Next, he's attracted to his physical characteristics, his sharp chin, okay, as if he were an artist drawing the picture. Okay, he would focus on that. And then he refers to his age, creating a sense of pathos for the old man. And lastly, he refers to his clothes worn and well used in his trade. This descriptive profile of the man's emotional, physical, age, and occupational characteristics create in the reader perceptions becoming thoughts. Okay, it's more than just description now, not just plain details. It's that gestalt that I was talking about. So the overall picture is larger than the parts, okay? So we draw a conclusion even about the scene, too, about the man, but, the little children, and he being part of it, and it being a slice of life, much as the scene in Come from the Field, Father, because that was like set in the backdrop of the cosmos. We had the Ohio villages, in the shade trees, cooling the back landscape in that poem. So here we have pretty much the same thing. It's a slice of life, and Whitman has, become spiritual, like a phantom, and he's risen above the scene. He's looking down on it, same way as in the other poem. The reader infer now, this is what I was talking about at the beginning, inductive reasoning. We infer conclusions about the man inductively, for Whitman has provided us with what he wants us to see. The next detail in the group is that of the unminded point set in its vast surroundings. So, you could fly by that phrase there and not pay much attention to it. But what it's saying is that, a small group of people, children and Whitman included, and man, knife grinder, unminded by whom? By the rest of the world. Okay, they don't see it. Okay, and it's set in vast surroundings. Now, I could even substitute for the word surroundings the vast creation or the vast universe, the vast cosmos. This small group is set there. He's created it. He's put it there. You set something down. So this little group is set in its vast surroundings. This detail allows Whitman to demonstrate that this little episode is a slice of life cut away from the rest of humanity. And they were referred to as the city's ceaseless crowd, murmuring in the background. We, along with Whitman, are privileged to peek into this time-spatial event while the rest of the world is absorbed in its own private engagements and activities. It is set before us with a large backdrop of the cosmos. Whitman then speaks of the sounds which create a kind of antiphonal harmony in the scene. The whirling stone, it emits an animating low hoarse purr of an animal, like a cat or a wildcat, all right, whatever. But it's now alive, counterbalanced by the restive bass. No, that's a musical term, the bass of the streets. That would be the sound of the passers by. And all the while we experience a liquidy unity to the scene. He says, myself effusing in liquid, and the sparks almost become liquid because they diffuse in different directions. They're dropping like drips of water, sideways darting, and they're referred to as tiny showers. So in here we have the unity of sound and of imagery of the liquid. And then in regards to the whirling stone, in the first stanza, it was referred to as simply a receptive object upon which the blade was sharpened by the pressure applied by the knife grinder. But in the closing lines, the second stanza takes on a life of its own with its animated sound. The poem ends with a beautiful climax of showers of gold sparkling from the wheel. All right, so nice little poem, very short, and probably one of his less known poems. So I'll read it again with those thoughts in mind. Where the city's ceaseless crowd moves on livelong day, withdrawn, I join a group of children watching. I pause aside with them. By the curb, toward the edge of the flagging, a knife grinder works at his wheel, sharpening a great knife. Bending over, he carefully holds it to the stone, by foot and by knee. With measured tread, he turns rapidly as he presses with light but firm hand. Fourth issue, then, in copious golden jet sparkles from the wheel. The scene and all its belongings, how they seize and affect me. The sad, sharp-chinned old man with worn clothes and broad-shouldered band of leather, myself effusing and fluid, a phantom curiously floating, now here absorbed and arrested. The group, an unminded point set in vast surrounding, the attentive, quiet children, the loud, proud, restive bass of the streets, the low hoarse purr of the whirling stone, the light-pressed blade, diffusing, dropping, sideways darting, and the tiny showers of gold sparkles from the wheel.